Hi everybody, Mark Friestad here with today's Daily Hope, coming today out of Jeremiah chapter 37, where the abuse of our favorite prophet just continues. But first, you're probably familiar with the expression, there are no atheists in foxholes. It seems to have come around about the time of World War I, when the expression was, there are no atheists in the trenches, and then it morphed to take on its familiar form in World War II. But one of the first mentions of this concept that we see in print comes from a magazine from 1918, and the author explains it this way. Men may scoff and be indifferent when death appears to be a faraway thing reserved for some distant old age, but they become serious when it may descend suddenly from the clouds or spring out of no man's land. And that's kind of what we see happening here in chapter 37 with the king of Judah, who is now Zedekiah. Zedekiah is something of a puppet king put in place by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. The son of the previous king has reigned for only 3 months. Zedekiah had to know that he was living on borrowed time. He had to have known that his fate wasn't really in his own hands. Nebuchadnezzar was pulling the strings. But with hope against hope, Zedekiah asks Jeremiah, the prophet, to pray for his regime. Now, at the beginning of chapter 37, in verse 2, it tells us Zedekiah and his attendants had really no interest at all in Jeremiah's prophecies, especially the warning prophecies that were issued to the previous king. And you'll remember King Jehoiakim not only disregarded, but delighted in cutting apart the parts of the scroll and burning them in the fire bit by bit. But nevertheless, when he's faced with imminent invasion from the Babylonians, King Zedekiah says, "Will you pray for us?" Jeremiah then hears from God, and he says, here's what's going to happen. Babylon will stand down, but Egypt, which has marched out to support you, will back off. And at that time, Babylon is going to come again, and they will be ruthless with their destruction. And then Jeremiah tries to travel to the land of Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin, but he gets stopped at the border and accused of desertion and thrown into a dungeon. And from there, King Zedekiah reaches out to him again and asks if there's any prophecy from God. It's as if he's saying, can you give me some good news, any news at all? And Jeremiah simply responds, you will be delivered into the hands of the king of Babylon. And then he asks this question, what crime have I committed against you or your attendants or this people that you have put me into prison? Well, what can we observe in Jeremiah and from Zedekiah that is helpful to you and me today? First, there are no atheists in foxholes. Zedekiah had really no interest in God's warnings through Jeremiah, no interest in God's guidance delivered in the past, no real interest or care about God's favor until the moment that he did. And I suppose we all have people in our lives, friends or relatives or family members who have no apparent level of spiritual interest. As far as we can tell, there's no spiritual need there. And then comes a crisis moment or a moment of existential despair that makes people open for a little bit of God. It may not be an eagerness for life conversion. They're not looking for you to give them a sermon. They're not looking to surrender their lives. It may just be as simple as what they believe to be a little bit of God's pixie dust, but it is an openness. So now let's talk about Jeremiah. He's been ignored, he's been scorned, he's been ridiculed, he's had his prophecy scrolls burned, and for what? Just for being faithful. We often associate the word faithfulness with positive outcomes, but in this case, Jeremiah was paying a real price for his faithfulness. And all he was the messenger. And yet, when it came time for the faithless Zedekiah to come to him with a prayer request, Jeremiah didn't shame him. He wasn't bitter towards him. He didn't hold past resentments over his head. He was generous in spirit. He apparently prayed for him, and then he brought him the prophecy, as hard as it was for Zedekiah to hear. We might say that Jeremiah in this situation spoke the truth in love. And the saga of Jeremiah will continue tomorrow in chapter 38.